One man used to shoot his gun out of a back window of his house, then changed that to shooting it inside the house at whatever was in sight, and later switched to firing the thing at himself until, thankfully, his mother or wife or somebody stepped in to stop him. Wait, that's not right. It wasn't his mother or wife or anybody like that. It was his own thinking that stopped it. Or, as it put it, that brought him to his senses. Myth tells of a man long, long ago who struggled to climb a mysterious mountain that he discovered near his home, and who, somewhere along the way, concluded that it was conducive to his success to announce aloud, even though he was alone, to whoever might hear, "Do me a favor, don't help." One man's shoes squeaked, so he started walking on his head, but the noise just worsened. A man once asked a mystic, "Is it hard to always know what you're doing when you're operating in another realm of awareness?" "Oh no," replied the alert one. "Not unless you think about it." And the man left feeling greatly unrelieved. In one solar system, an older planet turned and said to an upstart, "Well, just send a bus after them." And in some karmic news, one man who in a previous life was named Pookie Compost has decided not to come back. Says it's not worth the pain, or at least the embarrassment, whatever that means. There are two types of more conscious men: those who talk and those who don't talk. And those who talk are actually those who don't talk on break. Some more regarding how things are around where you live. One man over your way has this motto: if you don't know where you're going, take somebody with you. There are a lot of men like him around where you live. In fact, there are a lot like him in you. In a faraway galaxy was once a planet on which none but the sleeping could offer wake-up services. 'Tis a world with a promising future which sees fit, early on, to regulate commerce in the area of consciousness, so that oxen do not too soon attempt to rise above their natural station in life. And back over your way, that earlier man cries out, "I still say, if you don't know where you're going, take somebody with you." Which, now that I think about it, is not a bad representative statement reflective of the general movement of collective man. A little quiz game. What is the most insulting thing you can say to a mystic? No, let me rephrase that. What is the dumbest thing you can say to one more conscious? Wait. Change time again. What is the one thing you can say to a mystic that will clearly reveal just how insultingly dumb you are? Yes, now we've got it. And the answer is asking what the theory of his teaching is. Whilst reading one day, a man came upon these words: "Life is arranged so that if you wish to partake of its pleasures, you must also endure its pains." And thought, I didn't know we had a choice. Question: if you took away all of a man's enemies, what would you have? Well, if things went right, a man awake. Question: why don't things ever go right? That's an easy one, because everyone's too full of enemies. That's why. According to legend, there was once a man who used to attack himself, then stopped that and began to question himself, then changed that to simply looking at himself, then eventually, I forgot what I was going to say. That's it! That's it. He eventually just forgot about himself. That was close. And now from our international desk, this late-breaking story. There was once a man who swallowed an army of ants. What the hell is this? What kind of story you call that? Where's the rest of it? Is this you guys' idea of a joke or something? Jesus. Get serious. This is the news. I apologize. To try and dismiss mystics from his kingdom, if not his mind, one king so decided. Mystics are just those who went from playing with themselves sexually as children to playing with themselves mentally as adults. After thinking this, the ruler felt much better. At least as much better as is possible for one in his position. One man's shoes squeaked. And when he mentioned this to his doctor during an examination, the physician took a look at them and said, well, that's no wonder. They're made of man-made materials, some kind of plastic or something. You should try walking on your head. And the man snorted. Well, that certainly wouldn't improve the situation. And several hours after the man had left, the doctor regretted that he hadn't taken a closer look at his cranial structure. All between Paris and Istanbul does a ceaseless churn. A man went up into the mountains to visit a hermit reputed to be the wisest of the wise, and when he found him, asked this question: what do you call a mystic who fails? That is, what do you call someone who has struggled for the enlightenment but never achieved it? Do you still call them a mystic? And the hermit said, huh? Can you speak a little louder? And if not, could you say something that makes sense? And if this was a serious story, right here would be where the man suddenly awakened. But since I'm not qualified to tell such tales, the man instead just began to talk louder. Like most people do. There was once a man who wanted to go up into the mountains and find one liberated, to whom he could speak. But down in the village where the man lived was a tiger, which the man held by its tail, and which he believed he could not turn loose without suffering dire consequences. So you see, it was impossible for him to just turn loose and leave everything to go traipsing off in the mountains. So he stayed home and just started thinking louder to himself. It'll work every time, if you're ordinary. The more one sees, the more there is to be seen. Is this a change in the ability to see, or a change in the landscape? A certain mystic had two teachings. One said that the answer to everything is awakening, and the other held that there is no awakening. He said that the first one was food for the hungry, and the second medicine for those who had overindulged in the first. A supernatural experience you describe is supernatural no more. Okay, another little quiz-a-rooney. What's the funniest thing you can say to a mystic? Answer: to ask him, how can I be taught to awaken? Oh, I must interrupt here for a moment. I've just been handed an important travel advisory. Those who live in the midst of the tropics can't see the sun. Now back to our regular programming. There was once a father who so loved his son that he stopped telling him anything. If you have rats in your attic, which everyone does, the only way to rid yourself of them is to ignore them, which hardly anyone can. Vermin, you just got to love them, especially if you don't know you have a choice. Everyone knows what a mystic is talking about. Everyone hears it when he points out that their thinking is not their own and their consciousness is not under their control. Everyone hears and knows this is so, but only a few can make use of it and move on. There's no reason not to read page 1 again, is there? Who would know? What if another state of consciousness, the so-called enlightenment, liberation, awakening, what if, which it's not, but what if it were strictly an intellectual affair? What could then be said about it? I don't know, I ask you first. Might we speculate? That sounds better. Oh, you can ignore that speculate part. What could you say about this other state of consciousness if indeed it were strictly an intellectual proposition? I could start at any number of places, but how about this? You would intellectually be rid of gossip mind. And I have pictured something a bit more expansive than the ordinary would think of when they hear the word gossip. Ordinarily, gossip has a negative connotation, generally speaking. And it is connotatively used specifically, generally, I think you would agree, from one person to another to relay bad news about another person. You never hear gossip referred to as the conveyance of good news. What if I suggest to you that what goes on in a man's mind, whether he's talking about someone else, whether he's even overtly talking, what if I suggested that a fair name for everyone's intelligence, what they call their thinking, what they call, in fact, their personality, is a form of gossip? What if I suggested further and asked you to consider it, that everything is considered to be, by religion, to be immoral, ungodly, unworthy of humans, unworthy of decent humans, that all of that falls within the realm of gossip? And I am not referring to behavior when I say that ordinary men would say that, or when I was referring to religion, that everything that they consider to be ill and unbecoming of man could be considered a form of gossip. I am not referring to behavior. That is too simplistic for us to deal with, even though I continually stop and point it out. People can certainly behave in ways that are unspiritual, unchristian, unjewish, unacceptable, inhumane, according to humans' observation. There's no doubt about that. But that is for children, that is for savages, that is for those of such weak intellect that there's nothing to say. So we are not referring to behavior. Everything else, that is what appears to be to the religious the metaphorical, perhaps, reality, or the deeper spiritual reality behind all such things as the Ten Commandments, whatever the canons are of any religion. Behind it all, there I won't just use the term soul or spirit. It's the mind of man, the thinking of man, is behind that. They consider to be the depths, at least on a good day, if you got them, if they just been laid and fed good, and you could prop them up by the air conditioner and say, don't you think that there's something other than just behaving correctly? Don't you think that there's probably something to do with behaving correctly internally? And they know there is. Everybody knows there is. Can you see that everything is considered to be unacceptable in the internal world of man is a form of gossip. It is a form of gossip on this basis, that the intellect is still being run by the same juices, the same energy that runs everything about his physiological makeup. There is no separation between the mind and the body, none whatsoever. There's no speculation as to might they be connected. There's no worthwhile theories about the possible intercommunication between the two. They are run off of the absolute same fuel. The same energy runs the brain, that runs the muscles, that runs the stomach, that runs the kidneys, that runs the sex organs. The body continually gossips. The body gossips on the basis. We now almost have to picture ourselves in a bit more feral circumstances for it to make much sense, or those of you who are good at it, look at your pet dog. And you get the same feeling. But the body continually gossips. When somebody of the opposite sex walks by and you inadvertently, it's normally blamed on man. If a man's standing there with his wife and a fine-looking woman walks by, and the guy's talking to her, his wife's talking to him, he's going, yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear. She says, what are you doing? He goes, like, what? That old thing. That's the body gossiping. It is. Or you walk past a bakery and you stop and you look in at this unbelievably attractive German chocolate cake just filled with, covered in whipped cream and all kinds of stuff, and you drool. That's the body gossiping. When someone yawns, you feel good, you just got a bit, but somebody yawns and suddenly you yawn. That's the body gossiping. Someone sitting watching TV, watching a ball game, or out at a stadium, but even at home watching a ball game, and when they start going, yeah, hey, hey, and they start jumping up and down, that's the body gossiping. Does everyone get the point that the body deals in nonverbal gossip? It responds to, ordinary people would probably call them psychological clues, or psychologically inclined people would probably call them clues. It simply responds to stimuli that has to do with non-mental areas. That is mostly survival. We're talking about sex and eating and all the good physical stuff. When the stimuli is present and the body is not otherwise engaged, if you're eating already, then you're not going to drool. That is, assuming you're eating something that's least palatable to you. If you're eating something, then you're not going to drool over someone else walking or someone holding a picture of this German chocolate cake. And if you're already into heavy-duty intercourse, you're already engaged in it, and assuming that you actually are engaged in it, then you're not going to be much distracted. There's not much that suddenly somebody rushes in your room or is outside your bedroom window hollering, hey, I got the new Playboy, or I got some new skin magazine, or I got some, you might say later, see me tomorrow or sometime, but not now. Or, I guess you get the point, but I was going to say, nor would you be very positively inclined in a purchaser's sense if someone suddenly, I don't know how they got in your room, but awoke you in the middle of the night from a sleep to try and sell you with this brand new major breakthrough type mattress. You would be disinclined to give them a friendly hearing. But when the body is not otherwise engaged in the kinds of activities, and all of this, of course, is nothing that, other than me talking about it, is nothing that is normally is operating in this clear-cut a manner. It will from second to second. And if a man gets good, he can see it. But me talking about it, and if you'd never thought about it, if you just try and follow it and look for clear pictures of it, if you've never looked before, it may not seem that clear. How clear was that? Well, I understood it. What the hell? So if the body's not engaged, it will respond to stimuli and gossip in the ways I described. And as far-fetched or as surprising as the description may be, and me calling that gossip, if you will then move that into, some of you've got some awareness at all of what goes on in your mind that you call your thinking, then if you do, then I would ask you this at least rhetorical question. In what, in your thinking, would you submit to me is immune to the definition of gossip? The mind is continually responding to stimuli of a much less specific nature than food, sex, sleep, exercise. But the mind is continually responding to stimuli when it's not otherwise engaged. Now let's all holler out, when is the mind otherwise not engaged? And I'll respond back, almost all of the time. You mean you're going to sit there, passing yourself off as reasonably intelligent adults, and you're going to try and tell me that you engage in anything mentally that is as active, as passionate, as directly involved intellectually as the body does when you're eating when you're hungry, or screwing when you're horny, or sleeping when you're tired. How are you going to tell me that? Yeah, you're not going to try and pull that on me. Pull it on you, but not on me. That little faux sarcastic interlude was to try and get you to consider what I'm pointing at. Well, let's go back to what I was describing to the body right quick. If the body is not engaged in gossip, the kinds of exceptions I showed when I was saying that what it does, such as reacting to vicariously to a participation in watching other people move about, like watching sports or drooling, and me pointing out that you're not going to drool over food if you're in the midst of eating, etc. All right, let's turn it around the other way and look at it like this. You can see this much when you're truly hungry. Nothing big, but just when you're actually hungry, you're not just out socially eating or nibbling, but you're actually hungry and you sit down and eat. You do realize that your body is focused on eating. Mm-hmm. We don't normally think about it. And again, it's not that clear-cut anymore, since almost everyone, is beyond the subsistence level of existence, that you do not, every time you eat, portray like a famished wolf, that you don't know whether it's your last meal or not. And that's when I was saying that when you're truly hungry, because we know nowadays food is so readily available, and we're in our whole habits have gradually changed, that you can be staying around nibbling on something or sipping on a soda or something, and you're not really hungry. But so what I'm saying is, if you are actually hungry, that you've been on the highway, you've been working all day, and you put off eating, and you get inside and just make a sandwich or do something, and you sit down or stand there by the sink after you make it, everybody knows this, and you are hungry. Right then, nobody ever come in and try to fool around with you until you get that sandwich in you, or a glass of milk or something. Everybody knows that. Because that's when eating is fun. That is when you don't even think about it. You don't discuss it fun. You just... All right. Do you understand at that time, your body is focused on what it does? It is not otherwise distracted. This is just the same thing I was talking about from the other side a while ago. When you're standing there eating, that's all you're doing at that moment. For all intents and purposes, your body is doing nothing but eating. You understand? Even another aspect of the survival instincts, another characteristic of it. If you were that hungry, I hate to say this, I should have made the example the other way. But let's say you're starving, and if you're a man and suddenly this beautiful woman walks in the room in your kitchen out of nowhere and starts taking off her clothes and motioning to the bedroom, God, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but at least you'd go, all right, I'll be right there, and you'd finish the sandwich. That's a horrible example for a man to make. I can't believe I should have done it the other way around, but I'd already had my foot in it. I assume you get the point, is that the body is truly focused, or in the same way, not in what I should have done, if you're in the midst of having sex, and let's say that you love pastry or whatever it was, and suddenly a cook, a chef, a waiter rushes in your bedroom, again, not where he came from, and he holds up this sandwich, and you were hungry before you got in bed and started engaging in the wild thing, and the person says, look at this, And you glance up and you think, yeah, I would like to have it, but not right now. I'm doing this. And you could be actually hungry. Before you got in bed, you could have already been, you're the woman. You could have been talking about, well, boy, let's go eat. I am starving. Listen to my stomach. And suddenly, you know how sex goes. You suddenly get a look at her and go, all right, just, a couple of minutes. And so you start. The point is, if the body is not otherwise, if the body is directly engaged, it does not entertain anything else. Everybody knows this. The body is single-minded. The body is absolutely, singularly focused, again, to varying degrees. But if you're truly hungry and you eat, that's all you're doing. If you're really tired, not just that it's 12 o'clock or midnight and you think, well, I've got to go to bed. If you're actually tired from a hard day's work, when your body does that, and when you're actually sexually aroused by some other person, when you start doing that for the time that whatever it takes to eat, screw, whatever you're doing, the body is focused there. The body. Now we know we're not just the body anymore, but surely everybody understands that. There's nothing mystical about it. You just don't normally think about it in that way. There is no such thing, there's nothing resembling that transpires in a man's inner life. Oh, all right. There is an area wherein there is something that does resemble it. There is one area, one activity, it's normally considered an emotional experience that occurs apparently within a man. I'm just giving you the ordinary descriptions how people think about it. That resembles that kind of single-minded focus. And that's when someone is angry. To counteract anybody that was trying to think of a possible other exception, I will point this out. That there is no doubt attempting to work on an intellectual problem. If you've got a specific problem, there'll always be something external we're always talking about, or what I'm talking about now would be something in the nature of invention, revision of something, or just a man trying to figure out how to make a water wheel work better to irrigate his crops, or a man trying to write out a new program for a computer, or a man trying to work out a mathematical solution to something. When you've got a specific problem, the mind can do something resembling single-minded focus. But we all know, and this is not common as you know, but even when that happens, you do know it is an effort to keep it there. And do note this, there has to be an external reason to initiate it. People do not walk around by any means thinking, well, my mind just does not ever get focused on in a single manner like my body does. I believe I'll do it. I'll look around and find a problem that needs solving, and I'll do it. The so-called problem, the source, the impetus of this apparent, or of this attempt to try and focus the mind on one problem and hold it there. The problem has to arise. It has to be extant externally to you for that to happen. It is not something that men produce in themselves. So, given that its passing glance back to the only other instance of the inner workings of man that enters a state that in any way could be described as resembling single-minded, focused, and that is anger. I guess I'm going to have to point out to you, some people, if they were really trying, might say grief, but grief is a form of anger, by the way. How about just negative emotions? But it all falls into an aggressive feeling. It is a feeling, as ordinary people call it. They call it, their emotions, but it is a feeling of some conflict between you and the external world. That something has happened. Someone has mistreated you, someone has cheated you, or the grief aspect, life, God, somebody made a loved one die, and you're grieving over it. It's the same basic energy. And at that time, as everyone knows, if you get mad enough, you can walk around for hours, sometimes days, and all you're doing is picturing who it was that cheated you, and you just time after time, whatever the sentence was, if you said, you mean you're not going to refund my money? The guy going, yeah, when hell freezes over, you come back. And he walked off. For days, it goes over and over. Well, like the proverbial stuck CD. The doom, doom. And so on that basis, we can say that a man's inner life, this is consciousness. That's what it is, because it's not the body reacting. And to say it's your emotions reacting is just a stopgap measure. But at any rate, I'll let that go. It is, if you cut out thought, you cannot sustain the anger. That's always the front line cutoff of that particular attempted line or that attempted convoy of ammunition to emotions, to people saying, well, it's emotions, it's not the mind. The answer to that always is, if I guess I convoluted it up good again, didn't I? People who believe that emotions are in some way separate from thinking, then whatever emotional state you're in, I used to hand this out free with little gumdrops to children and some adults, and everybody used to come back and give me their chewed up gum and said they didn't want it after thinking about it. But here it is again. All you got to do, and plus you people who have psychiatric problems, this is free. Come think about it, I started to warn like, well, I'm not actually a psychologist and you shouldn't take this as medical advice, but that's unnecessary because you're not going to use it anyway. But here it is. Whatever your emotional problem is at any particular time, and the more pressing, the more single-minded, the more overbearing it is on you, such as I was just describing, of you replaying this guy who cheated you and the way he acted, and you see him over and over and hear his voice. All you have to do with any emotion is extract your mind thinking about it. Stop that, and there you are. Of course, it can make some people, I understand, I've just been told this, blow up like a damn cheap tire in this, in July, like one of those $5 Maypops that you buy off the back of somebody's truck. Because if you're mad and you stop the internal talk, if you stop talking about it, you stop being mad. You can't do both. Of course, that makes some people madder. It's why they used to bring me back my bubble gum and say, well, here, I don't want this. See, because they felt obligated to try what I said. That's why I quit. That gets pretty yucky. People come and bring you back chewed up gumdrops and bubble gum and saying, well, I decided I don't want it after all. Thanks for nothing. But if you're intellectually following, running around, trailing and running ahead and sideways to all this, then you must see by now, it should have already run through your mind, of what other possibility is there when the mind, what happens naturally, normally, inside of a person's thinking that resembles in any way the body's reaction and attitude toward eating, sex, sleep, all of just anything you come up with that the body naturally does, which falls generally in those categories, that it is naturally attracted to, it must have, and it does not require in any way the participation of thinking. Thinking is not required to eat, to have sex, to sleep, to go for a run. You can do it. If you could turn off your mind, it would be no problem. None. You wouldn't be any... At times past, I point that to people, and I've had somebody try to say, well, if you could actually turn off the mind, what you're saying, it'd be dangerous. You couldn't go out, for instance, for a jog, run down the side of a highway without your mind working, be able to tell what you're doing. And that's not true. I don't know. I'll try it one more time. I guess some of you might hear it. More than 50% of the people would actually be better off in that one condition. That if they're going to run along the edge of the highway, they go out for their daily run, more than half of the people who do that would be much safer if they could turn off their mind. The body would operate in a more graceful, safe manner. Except we're just people ordinarily, when people hear such as that, their ordinary reaction is to deny it, to argue with it. But all of you should know by now, you can do things your body can see without the mind. Your body can run along a fine rope. In fact, if you don't know it, I don't know whether they know it, but it's got to be, well, circus performers, daredevils, people like walking high wires and such as that. In some sense, I've never talked to them, but I understand for them to do it correctly, for them to do it the most handily, to do it the best, which to them, of course, is the safest way possible. They, to some degree, have found some way through trial and error. Other people do it, but I'm just saying, to be standing up there with no net and walk along a fine wire, and you look at it and think, I'd die. You're right. You think, boy, if I took one step off, I'd fall off. You're right. If you think that, you would. And in fact, they have to suppress thinking about it. I've never talked to them, I don't know, but now I know how life is, that there are things that they hand along from teacher to student that would be something like, well, don't think about it. That probably is too blunt for them, but but now there's got to be phrases. They consider it important, probably secret circus type information. Well, if you think that's too strange, how about this? You get drafted and get in the service. You get in a landing craft and they send you out and they say, be careful and look up there on the hills there. Everything you see across there, all those little black dots, that's all the enemy, and they all got machine guns. And so when you hit the beach, be careful. And you look up, and your thinking would tell you, be careful. What kind of idiot? I got a chance in a million of making it. And yet, they open up the damn bay door, and everybody runs, and what do? You run with them. It's the same thing. It's not exactly the same thing, but I just wanted to counteract. It seemed to be that some of you were reacting. My impression was that you thought my circus example was a bit too exotic or too narrow. The body, well, the other one I pointed, people cook for a living, professionally, or people do it in their kitchen that cook enough, but you can stand watch somebody cooking in a place that's got a whole row of deep fries. And they'll stand there and they'll talk to somebody. They'll talk to a waitress, talk to anybody, and they will stand there and never look. They don't have to look. And they can pick up a chicken leg or a piece of fish fillet or something and get down. They don't want to drop it in because they'll splash. And they'll talk to somebody and turn around and get that close to the grease, to the hot grease, and go, yeah, and keep talking. They'll pick up another one and do it. The point is, the body does not need the mind to operate. But you're not accustomed to thinking about it that way. And so that's why I was stopped for that, is people will absolutely deny it. Which is what they would deny if I insisted that the average person that was running down the side of a highway for their daily jog, that they would be actually safer. Or if you want another way, if you go out, if you're trying to be graceful, if you're taking up ballet, once you learn the steps or whatever it is, same way as a tightrope walker or a soldier. The soldier's not exact, but I was trying to counteract any of you thinking it was too specific. If you let the body do, once you learn, I was saying ballet, learning anything new, you have to, of course, learn it mentally. Somebody has to say, well, you do this and you do that. But then once you do it, you need to stop thinking about it. And those who do it enough, which the ordinary people, they look at as practice makes perfect, that if you dance a certain dance enough, if you rehearse it enough, then when it gets time for the performance, you don't have to think, all right, however they script it out, you don't have to think, well, let's see, I jump here and I do a pirouette. You just do it, which is the point of it. The more that the body just does it, the more graceful you are. Running down the side of the highway, if you're running along there, there's no doubt. Traffic's flying by and you only got a little space here and people get hit every day. And an ordinary person would say, in response to my picture and my comment, they would say, wait a minute, that would be dangerous. Even if you could get off the mind, what you're saying that'd be better off, you're absolutely wrong, because as you run along, you got to be aware of it. I mean, you got to be thinking, be aware that traffic's flying by. All right, let me get this straight. If it wasn't for your mind and your body was running along with these large 3 and 4 ton pieces of metal flying by, you're going to tell me that without your mind thinking about this car's coming by, this car, and they're getting close, that they're coming fast, you're trying to tell me, you're going to sit there and tell me that your body would just that your body would be lost? You know damn well it wasn't. Well, if you don't, then we'll switch over and play a Woody Woodpecker cartoon instead of me finish. Assuming you could tell the difference. That's right, we got time for those 12-minute reelers. The whole point of that, if you lost your place, was for me I'm trying to describe something that people do not normally think about. In fact, as I'm trying to point out, they almost cannot think about it correctly. And that is that the body, when it's not otherwise distracted, the body, let me put it back the other way, the body, when it is focused in, when it is engaged in that which is singularly based on it, that you're eating because you're hungry, you're not staying there eating out of habit, out of nervousness, to be sociable. If you're staying there eating because you are hungry, then the body is single-minded, figuratively speaking, that it is focused on nothing but that. That eating right then is all that the body is aware of. That's the only existence to the body at that time. There is nothing comparable to that in the mind. And in fact, the body, when it is focused like that, at that time, again, no one notices it, and it's of no real consequence other than the fact that you can learn something from it and how to use it, is it decreases your awareness of the thinking processes. That your consciousness is not as focused, is not as limited to whatever the normal flow of thoughts through your mind is. It is less, just momentarily. Nobody benefits from it, other than the fact that you can realize that this energy is running the body and the brain. And it's according to sometimes when you got more energy running through the body, the brain has less energy to run on. Everybody knows this another way. When you're sick, you can't think good. If the body is actually ill, the body will use up more of the energy, take out a bigger proportion to run the body and to heal it, and you'll feel it. Everybody knows that. You just get a cold, get a bad cold, and you know damn well you can be at work or trying to talk to somebody, and in the middle of a sentence you don't know what you're doing. You have to say, I don't feel good. I'll have to talk to you about it tomorrow. You can't. People say, I can't concentrate. So what I'm saying is when the body is engaged as much as is possible, singularly in its kind of unique activities, it deletes, it takes part of the energy that's normally running just the automatic daydreaming and the internal flow of so-called thinking in one's mind. Conversely, I said that the only thing that was similar, the only thing that would even appear to be similar insofar as there being a single-minded focusing on something in man's inner, in the intellectual world as opposed to the physical, would be when a man was seriously aggressive, when he was extremely upset in a negative manner, not positive manner. You can think about it, but has anyone ever been so happy? There's a term, I was so happy I was delirious. But everybody knows that's a joke. You don't get so happy that you can't be made unhappy. In other words, what appears to be emotionally, that somebody can get so angry or so grief-stricken, same thing as I said, but so angry that you know damn well if you get angry enough and somebody stops by your house, a friend, your best friend, and tries to cheer you up, it's the danger of you hitting them. It's the danger of your best friend or relative. You go, damn it, leave me alone. Come on, cheer up. I don't cheer up. And you don't. When you're that upset, when you're that caught in an apparent focused manner dealing with negative emotions, hostile feelings, it is not by any means an easy matter or even possible with ordinary people to turn that from being hostile and negative into positive. We all know that. That's no secret. The only reason I bring it up is to show you the other way around. Somebody can be happy and you can give them the red ass in 30 seconds or less. Well, life does it. You can be just whistling and da-da-da-da-da and get a phone call and find out your best friend died. And that's the end of that. We're talking like that. The apparent single-mindedness of the only type that appears to fit the definition of a man's intellectual life, and that is when he is emotionally, which is intellectually based. And for those of you who don't like it, I'll tell you one more time, if you don't like that description, then try it the other way around. Subtract thinking from any emotional state and see what you got left. And what you got left is the body and a momentarily blank mind. Plus you got a hole where you thought emotions were. In fact, it's better than a hole if you're real upset. If you do that, it's like where the hole was, suddenly there is this brisk, stimulating little gust of like ocean breeze. But enough of that, I'd rather be pissed. I know. But if you extract the thinking, then the emotions are gone. But back to when you have them, that seems to be the only time or the closest thing to a man's internal life being focused on one thing. Would anyone suggest that that's of any benefit? We'll just press on, and if you're sane, you'd say certainly not. I know you would say, I know the state well. I know how it is to get so mad that you can't get over it, or to be so emotional about something. And it's always, remember, it's always a negative. No one ever says, I've been so happy now for several days, I'm getting sick of it. You know, I need somebody got to help me. I can't stand it. That's silly. The only complaint is always that my emotions, the way I'm feeling, is not joyful. It is not pleasurable. So the point is, the only thing resembling a single-mindedness to the mind, to thinking, is when it is involved with something of a very hostile, aggressive, emotional nature. It is not simple thinking. It has what appears to be passion. And it is always of a negative condition, and so my question was, if you remember, I started out saying, obviously you can see it that the body, when it's engaged in those activities natural and necessary for it, can do so with a single-minded focus that is unique. That is, after I pointed that out, and you all got to see when I used sex and food and sleep, it's obvious. Then I said there is nothing comparable in man's inner world, that is the intellectual world. There is nothing comparable to that. Then I said there is one condition, there is one circumstance that appears to be similar, and that is when you are extremely emotionally upset. So we gave it that. So now my question is, even if that does match the description, is there anyone who thinks of that or would call that beneficial? Is anyone in favor of that? If that were, and I'm still not saying it's the exact, well, it's not the same thing, but I wasn't inferring, but it just seems to be the one time that a man's attention can be focused. There's that great old line, one of you made me do that. If I don't know who it is, I always credit it to Dr. Johnson. About how surprising it was when a man knows he will be hung Monday, how surprising, how it goes, how it can focus his attention over the weekend, how clear-minded he gets. That is over one thing, which is exactly what we're talking about. He just turned it into a little satirical bon mot. But who would consider that even if that fit the description, that here we have the one instance where a man's inner life, his thinking, can actually focus on one thing. That is when you're good and pissed and real mad or grief-stricken. Would anybody say, well, hey, good? Everyone sees it as non-beneficial. Now we're left with this question. Then if the one thing that seems to resemble the mind being able to be of a single-minded focus, if the one thing that seems to resemble it, no one cares for, that everyone would do away with, that everyone dismisses, that everyone rejects as being pleasurable, desirable, then what have you got left? I probably wasted 30 minutes by even going through the example of those kind of aggressive emotions. Because what you're going to end up with, if you can see it at all anyway, is there is nothing. There is nothing natural in thinking. There is no eating. There is nothing resembling eating for the mind. There's nothing resembling sex for the mind. There's nothing resembling sleep for the mind. I normally speak as though I'm telling the truth. What if I'm wrong this time? I normally speak as though I'm convinced of what I'm saying. What if this is a joke this time? What if I don't really mean it? But see, here's the thing about thinking. Even if I know otherwise, and I'm stating as a fact, even presenting to you like, consider it. Am I right or am I wrong? There is nothing in man's intellectual life that to the intellect resembles what food is to the body. That there is nothing that the mind is ever presented with, that your thinking processes ever stands next to the sink and makes itself a sandwich and eats it. I mean, eats it to the point that no matter what happened, naked women, a herd of wild elephants running through with firecrackers in their snouts, that you glance, but there's nothing happens in the intellectual world that you'd keep eating. In the same way that I said, if you were hungry enough and a beautiful naked woman came in, and you go, just a second, and you'd finish the sandwich. That is single-minded devotion. That is a focus of hunger, physical, gastronomical hunger. I am saying there is nothing resembling that in the intellect. There is nothing that the intellect can do that somebody could come along and go, ooh, look over here and do this. And then go, just a second. Nothing. Is what I said. And if you're an ordinary sane person, and even if I could put it to you rhetorically and say, am I correct or not, you would say, yeah, I can't think of anything. So apparently I would be correct. And my question was, what if I know better? What if I presented something that seems irrefutable and I know it is futable? But that offers another question. Does that mean I know something extraordinary, or does that mean I just know how the mind works? And somebody's mind said, wait a minute. One dirty question at a time. But see, that's the thing about the mind. If you give it one dirty question it can't answer, it actually appreciates a follow-up unanswerable question. It does. Again, that's the way the mind works. And I could also suggest to you that's why many of the so-called Zen stories strike people, ordinary people, some people, as being extraordinary in some way. Because when they're done, the kind of the ones that suggest at least that the response of some wise awakened man to some neophyte, that his almost inscrutable, insane reply to some question or some comment threw the student into another state of consciousness. The thing is, what that represents, along the lines I'm talking about now, is it presented the mind with an unanswerable question and didn't give it a follow-up. I'm not going to have to stoop so low as to think up some example of one of those stories. I thought everybody, you know those kind of stories that the student says, what is so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. And the guy goes, blah, blah, blah. And you go, what? Which is supposed to be the point that I'm telling you now. But it would be a different story in the story. if the student went, what? That didn't make any sense. And the guy went, well, okay, try it this way. The stories wouldn't be that as intriguing, even in passing, to ordinary minds. The mind is always, thinking is always let off the hook if you do not force it to focus at one place and just leave it there. Which you can't force it, I'm using the language loosely, but by me asking such questions is, what if I pointed out or ask you a question, can you find any example wherein there's anything in your intellectual world, man's intellectual activity, that there's anything that resembles the relationship between a hungry man's body and food? Is there anything in the intellect that even comes close to that? And I went ahead and answered for you and said that the ordinary mind is going to say, after they think about it, is going to say, no, I can't think of one, you're right. And then I said, what if I stated something that appeared to be ironclad correct, bulletproof, and I know for a fact it's not? And forget me knowing something's not the point, but what if it were true, that I know better? And you think, well, shit, I'm as smart as you are. Yeah. And I don't see anything. That doesn't mean it couldn't be there. But what does it tell you about thinking? That you can talk to thinking about itself. That you tell thinking, well, listen, we're not talking about the body now, we're talking about thinking, you. And you go, okay, the intellect, yeah, gotcha. There's nothing in the intellect, there's nothing in life to which the intellect will focus on, be attracted to, in the same way that the body will, when it's hungry, to food. And you're talking right to thinking. You're not talking to the body, you're talking to the thinking when you say that and go, there's nothing similar to it. Tell me, is there? Somebody goes, no, there's not. Now that you mention it. And I go, well, what if there is? Now I'm the one that just pointed out that there's not, or gave the thinking the chance to respond negatively or to correct me, and it went, well, no, you're right, there's not. And then what if I said, well, I know for a fact there is? Good night. Yeah. That is, if I just stopped there and walked off and left it. Of course, ordinary intellect's not going to kill it. They'll respond, they'll just forget the whole thing or think, well, it didn't make any sense. Yeah. But carry it on yourself. How is it that intellect can be told, given an idea that seems to irrefutably describe it, limitations, to which it agrees that, yeah, you're right, that's the nature of the mind. You go, well, I happen to know for a fact it's not. There's an exception to that. And the mind thinks, well, no, I heard you quite well. I never thought about it. In fact, I found that intriguing, what you said. And now you say that's not true. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If I walked off, I left it there, an ordinary mind would get nothing out of it. I'm asking, can you get anything from that? Useful. I can't believe anybody be here tomorrow night.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.